And just like the fires that keep the brazier alive at the mountain that will immediately go out if I stop posting videos, Continual Flame.
I wanna go home.
We can never go home, Pat. We're wanted men. We'll spend the rest of our lives running. But at least it's warm around the fire.
Hey, if we're underwater, how could there be a...
Second level evocation, casting time of 1 action, range of touch, components verbal somatic material, ruby dust worth 50 gold pieces, which the spell consumes. Duration, until dispelled. The flame equivalent in brightness to a torch springs forth from an object that you touch. The effect looks like a regular flame, but it creates no heat and doesn't use oxygen. Continual flame can be covered or hidden, but does not smother or get quenched. Let's talk about lighting. So for Continual Flame, we have a bit of a deal to work around with it. Namely because this is the spell that will light your villain's chambers. It will ignite and it will stay there. It could be in their hands or gloves or that, I'm sorry, haven't even talked about that point. I'm skipping ahead. Big important thing is if you never want torches again, get 50 gold pieces worth of ruby dust. Or if you stumble across ruby dust, you have something to cast on. It's only a 2nd level spell, it's not gonna hurt that much. Flame equivalent to brightness to a torch, it even specifically states as such. Isn't that bad. It looks like a regular flame. So now it's going to be too fancy colors. It's still going to look like fire, but it's not going to burn out unless anti-magic hits it, which depending on the setting, who's casting, how people frequently are dispelling, Though it doesn't create any heat and doesn't use oxygen, which means you can bring this underwater. You can have an entire underwater temple that it's lit by torches, or at least looks like that. I mean, it's all Continual Flame, but man, if you want to confuse your players for a brief moment, and just have an underwater fire moment just like SpongeBob, this is the one to go for. Can't be smothered or quenched, the flame remains. How to put it outside of this being a utility spell, but weirdly not a spell used too much for players? Because most of the time, if you're gonna have something to just ignite, you're either gonna have a torch on you, some kind of lantern, or you're gonna have people who can cast the light spell or mage light. You're not really gonna need Continual Flame, especially since it's a 2nd level and has a decent gold cost for what it does. As in, not decent in the bad way, decent as in like, oh, that's a bit expensive for what it does. 50 gold pieces for ruby dust for a fancy light. Yeah, no, this is gonna... Yeah, no, that's gonna be a bit strange. Just the fact that, utility-wise, you are going to be having this world building. That's the thing. I'm hopping all over the place, but splitting this down into 2 categories. We're going to cover players first, which we've already started on, and then we're going to go into world building and DMs. You know, stick around for that. Player-wise, if you want a fire aesthetic and not actually risk burning anything down or it being put out, this is what you're going to use it for. Or like having people just... Because you can even if it's not a magic sword, you can cast this on a weapon or object or piece of clothing. You can just look like you're on fire all the time. Outside of aesthetic purposes, you also always have a light source next to you. I remember I had a wizard character who had a permanently burning helmet with a tiefling's horns in it. He had a grudge. But it's a bit neat. It looks like flame. It isn't, though. That's the other thing, is it's still going to look 100% like fire. It's not really like those weird, the stereotypical blue glow lights that you see in a bunch of high magic settings or different areas in like an elven temple or something, or different floating mage lights in a lantern. Nah, this just looks like fire. And it's fire that doesn't go out, doesn't get quenched, doesn't need oxygen. You can entirely contain this. So if I was to recommend something, this is going in tombs, temples. Now we're heading to the world building side of it. Forgot to mention that. This is going to be for quite a few things. Tombs, temples, torches properly, vehicles, anything that's a bit wooden and is a bit too dangerous to have an open flame around, but can still have this aesthetic-wise, or just a presence of eternal light. Especially because depending on how your setting works with making magic items, it might be better to actually cast this versus making a magic item that's permanently glowing or has some kind of light spell tied to it. And like I said, similar to the swords. If you're a faction or a leader that's whole thing is fire, this is going to be everywhere. Everywhere. A permanently burning brazier. Oh, also, Warhammer aesthetics-wise, candles on everything. I mean, the candles could be broken, but they don't actually have to be lit, so they're not going to melt away over time. They'll just stay in their static position with the flame on top of it. Now, there's also a question of whether... It says until dispelled, but if you can't place this in midair, you have to touch something? So if the thing you're touching, if that's destroyed, does the spell also go away? Would it count as dispelled because it doesn't have an object to latch onto anymore? No, I'd leave that one up to you. And this discussion of Continual Flame went on for a bit longer than I had first anticipated. Though, for the ranking... Oh, one last thing. Before the ranking itself, if we're talking world building wise, rubies are going to be super valuable. Way more than they usually are already. I'd even rank them higher. I guess that depends how easy Revivify is in your setting, but a permanent oxygenless light source that doesn't burn. Yes, there's stuff like technology and stuff and electric lights depending on your setting and Magitech, but even that far back, a mage-based society is going to have thousands of these lighting a city. And that is going to take a lot of ruby dust. Something to take in mind when it comes to material components is how many people are actually what's the demand for those components? Poor ivory spells. 5 out of 10? It says second level spell slot and 50 gold pieces for a permanent torch, which various cantrips can already cover, even if they only last for a tiny bit. World building wise though, oh man, is this going to be used by a bunch of people, but for players and just individually picking it up, unless you're going for the aesthetic, don't see it coming up that much.